Yeah, so it's not all that surprising. The G20 has played a significant role and more prominent role in recent years, addressing a whole range of issues that the forum provides a really useful platform for engagement on. And of course, this one happens to come just after China has put a 12-point peace plan to the Russians that was only rejected recently. And Modi himself in India has tried to come up with another one to put to the Russians to make concessions. Russia's really pushing back on that, even though it's its two closest supporters, really. China most explicitly with its no limits friendship, but even India with as part of the BRICS arrangement, which has been very reluctant to be too critical of Russia because of its dependence on Russia for much of its military technology and a lot of its trade. But it's very interesting to see Modi went there. S. Jaishankar, the foreign minister, followed it up. But Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, point blank refused. Anthony Blinken pushed it as well. The real resistance there. And that means that we're probably facing this war continuing for quite some time to come, even though on the battlefield itself, the Russians continue to get walloped. There's news just out recently of another tank column. The Russians don't seem to learn. The tactics are echoing those that were used in February and March last year. Another ambush of armoured vehicles by very well-placed Ukrainian forces. So this is a slogging match that's going to go on for quite some time to come.
But do you think India was just too ambitious in its determination to get Russia to agree to a quote, complete and unconditional withdrawal from the territory of Ukraine? Did it miss an opportunity here to make some progress towards peace, if not complete peace?
So it was leveraging off the points that were made by the Chinese in their 12-point plan, which spoke to recognition of sovereignty of the states. And so it might have gone a little bit further, but they're in a difficult position because they're clearly under pressure from the United States to go further than they've gone. And by going there, they've made effectively a concession to Blinken and the United States that they get the urgency and the gravity of the issues, and they are prepared to diplomatically at least put their foot forward on that, recognising that in the grand scheme of things, much like with China's initiative only last week, it's highly unlikely to get progress unless and until Russia is in a position where it feels it's got no options. And that may well be coming. The progress in the battlefield, there's been a sense that the Ukrainian offensive was going to come in late winter, early spring, and the efforts so far have just been really not very effective. But once again, we have this problem that quantity has a quality all of its own, and Russia still has the quantity, and that can still be thrown at it, and that's the great fear, and that's driving, of course, the resistance and the pushback from Western countries, particularly NATO countries, that are saying we need to continue to support Ukraine so that in that face of that, the quantity, the Western quality that's supporting Ukraine and the quality of the Ukrainian soldiers is enough to hold Russia at bay and drive Russia to the point where they recognise they need to back down.
So, John, how significant was this, meeting between the US and Russian foreign ministers? Short though it was, at least they met.
Yeah, exactly. At least they met. Lavrov would have been in a position to get very, very clear from Blinken the message from the United States. He, of course, has got limited freedom of action. Putin calls all the shots. So he'll be going home to relay these messages and relay to Putin the sense of the meeting, the mood of the meeting, and what that means in terms of the options for Russia in going forward. But of course, the problem is that while many of the G20 countries are in agreement that we want the war to end, Russia is still working assiduously behind the scenes with, the South, the global South, countries in Africa and Latin America and elsewhere, to mitigate the effects of sanctions, to keep the door open for other trade and benefits to accrue, to allow Russia to continue economically and therefore strategically and militarily to sustain its war despite the cost on Russia and everybody else in the meantime.
John, Australia's Foreign Minister Penny Wong met her Chinese counterpart for the first time. That's a sign of, continuing sign of a warming relationship with China?
Yeah, it is a positive sign, and it is one of the great benefits of these meetings where you can have these small sidebar conversations that don't They don't accrue the same kind of protocol significance. So it is a stepping stone along the way. Both sides, China and Australia, are mindful that there are some deep structural limitations to how far they can go, but rhetorically there's space for more to happen. And of course there's a movement that Australia is still waiting for to see confirmed further on the lifting of trade sanctions that would open the way for greater normalisation. But even so, we're not talking about a normalisation going back to what we saw pre-2018 or 2019. The bottom line is that the world is now different. The pressures from the United States and NATO countries in Western Europe, Japan and others are now far less accommodating towards China's policies and China's assertiveness. And as we've seen even last week with Mike Burgess's remarks, while not directly targeting China, it's very clear that there is a bipartisan consensus that Australia is going to stand its ground on principles about foreign interference and espionage, which is crimping China's freedom of action in Australia, and it's happening internationally as well.